Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi, and today we have another San Diego Regionals team report, and I am joined by two top players. I am joined first and foremost by the runner-up of the biggest regional ever, Chuppa Cross. How are you doing?
Hi, Adi. Thanks for having me on. I'm a longtime VGC player, been playing for about 10 years with a number of regional top cuts, and recently got top 32 at Worlds in London. So, really excited to be able to talk about the team today.
Yeah, it's. I've been waiting to have you on the channel for a little bit. I was going to try to do it for London, but that kind of fell through, as you know we didn't have events afterwards. But yeah, I'm glad that you finally have. I finally have an opportunity to bring you on the channel, and everyone can hear your insight. I'm really excited. And then of course we also have the mastermind behind this entire team. We have the builder, Mike D'Angelo. How are you doing?
Great, Adi. Thanks for having me on the channel again.
Yeah,
Um, I've been playing VGC for a while, not as long as Chuppa, but I did pretty well in some of the online tournaments during the VGC time skip, and now I'm looking to get some wins under my belt for this new format in Scarlet and Violet.
I have no doubt that you will. And I am, yeah, excited to talk about what is the premier team, the scariest team of Scarlet and Violet that you guys have really mastered so far. It is, of course, Dondozo. So I guess to start, why did you guys choose to build around Dondozo for the first regional of the year?
Yeah, so as soon as we began to learn more about the games and the mechanics within them, Dondozo and Tatsugiri's commander interaction stood out to me as just like incredibly strong right off the bat. +2, and every stat is reminiscent of EV's extreme Evo boost back in 2017, which is like a crazy move that kind of makes a bad Pokemon very worth using. And in Dondozo's case, you're not using Eevee to get those boosts. You're using it on a Pokemon with like very respectable 530 BST, just good stats all around. So it just stood out as something that's like there has to be some potential there. And I think we really did our best to figure out what that potential is.
hmm Yeah, I think I've been a big fan of Dondozo since like Thanksgiving time frame. I saw them on. I think I started out a little bit more of a hater, like a lot of people, and thought, "Oh, you're playing 1v2. How could this thing be as good as it's being hyped up to?" And then I got bashed by it a couple times on ladder, and I was like, "All right, let me see what this thing's worth." And then probably a week later, I thought this was the best Pokemon in the format, and there's no way I'm not bringing it to San Diego.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that that's just probably the best approach to an early regional is you find the most broken thing as you guys identified, and then try to perfect it. And of course, your team looks quite a bit different from some of the other Dondozo teams. At least, definitely has some very different choices. So, can you talk me through how you guys ended up building this team?
Yeah, I'll let Mike take the reins on this one because I think you were really the one to figure out some of the choices on this. I guess I'll begin by talking a little bit about other Dozo teams that I've used first. I remember when Aaron got second at that Limitless event with Dondozo, Meowscarada, Sylveon, Armorage, Hydreigon. That stood out as a really balanced team. I liked it at the time, and then a few weeks later, you had some similar teams like with Terra Flying Dondozo starting to pop up, and I really liked those at the same time. But again, it felt like maybe they weren't quite up to date with the meta. At which point I talked with Mike. I knew that he'd been doing great on ladder with his own version of Dondozo and really wanted to kind of learn what's like set his version apart from those.
hmm so when I started building with Dondozo, I think um, I ended up my first revision of this team had like four of the six Pokemon that were the final version. I ended up with Tatsugiri, Dondozo. Obviously, you need those two, and then the third Pokemon in the builder was Pawmot because I thought Revival Blessing at that time wasn't even implemented on ladder. So I was just trying to think of creative ways that move could be used. And then I found that right Dondozo goes down, and then you can just revive it and bring it back. So the way I approached building the team from there was just how many teams could realistically beat two Dondozos, and assuming you had a Tera in the middle there. So you start with a water type Dondozo. They have to answer that. Then you Tera it, so now it's a different type, and then it faints, and then you revive it, and you have a whole another water type Dondozo. So finding the things that beat that, and then filling those holes out with 3 more Pokemon was really the goal from the start there. A Gholdengo was on the first draft of the team, not because I thought it was the right fit. It was just a really broken Pokemon. And then I think Grimmsnarl and Annihilate were the last 2. They ended up getting swapped around a lot. Meowscarada found its way on the team after Aaron got his 2nd place finish in the Limitless Tour, and then Holding Light got a 1st place finish with Pawmot, Meowscarada, Dondozo. So, like, at that point, I was just a believer in Meowscarada on the team. It just fits out the type chart so well with grass coverage, so strong U-turn, so you could get cool plays between, switching into your Tatsugiri easier. And then, I probably went through a dozen Pokemon in the 6th slot trying to round out all those other holes. Dragons, Murkrow was one of the things, and then Trick Room were the 2 big roles I wanted that thing to do. And so I landed on this Arcanine. Arcanine, really bulky Arcanine with Snarl was the answer to Trick Room. And Rajan threw the idea of Tera Fairy Play Rough to help with the dragons. And the Hydreigon, Garchomp, Murkrow hits all those really well. And then from there, it just felt like the team was complete.
And how long before the regional were you settled on this team?
I think I bred the team 2 weeks before San Diego and didn't touch it since.
I'd probably decide on it about 1 week beforehand. I was like having a little bit of team anxiety, and then used this in one of our in-house practice tours, did great with it, and kind of remembered like, oh, I think Dondozo is just the archetype that I know the best. And at that point, I think I'd been pretty convinced that Arcanine was the best Pokemon the last slot after trying a few other things and none of them feeling quite right. Not to say that Arcanine's perfect, but I think it really does, like, it is the best last Pokemon for it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, at one point it was a Volcarona, like Struggle Bug Volcarona, to do similar things. I tried Baxcalibur because it had like great coverage into the dragons with Ice Shard to hit the Murkrow, but Arcanine was just it.
Yeah, Arcanine is such a powerful Pokemon. Everyone thought it would be kind of everywhere, and it hadn't seen a ton of play. Do you guys feel that Arcanine was or even Dondozo, I guess, for that matter, was better because of Open Team Sheet, or do you think it actually struggled more because of the Open Team Sheet that we had?
I'd say that Open Team Sheet was like probably more of a blessing for Dondozo than anything else. Like, sure, it's a little annoying that my opponents get to know that we're running like Rest and Terra Dragon Order Up at the same time. Like, those probably aren't going to change how you approach Dondozo like too drastically, especially with like Leftovers revealing itself after you've taken like any chip damage. It's an item that kind of gives itself away. On the other hand, it lets me know what sort of sets I'm going to be running into. Like, let's say I know that an Amoonguss has dropped Clear Smog. For this particular Dondozo, that's a huge issue. It just means that I am liable to, tank a Spore with Chesto Berry and then just go crazy with my Terra Dragon Order Ups. Or maybe okay, the Murkrow isn't running Haze for some reason. There's just a lot of things like that kind of let you rule out things that your opponent might be trying to scare you with in closed team sheet, but then in open sheet, they don't actually have it. And I think the Dondozo player is really the one that comes out ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only other thing I'd add, I agree with everything, is that when you are playing 1v2, it is really helpful to know exactly where the protects are, so that you don't accidentally whiff your one attack of the turn into that. You could make safe Earthquakes if you have to, or you could just kill a slot because it's pinned.
Yeah, I think that's especially true of Dondozo, where sometimes the early game is this question of like, okay, I've got maybe Meowscarada and Palmot or Meowscarada and Gholdengo, and your main job is just kind of go crazy on some of their Pokemon. Put that chip down for Dondozo to come in a few turns, get set up on them, and when you know where the protects are, it's just like, okay, I know that maybe a Moongus is a threat, or their Meowscarada isn't focus as its choice band. It really lets you target down the things that you need to target down and just do it as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. I feel like Dondozo is one of those teams where you have to have a really good idea of your game plan going into it, both when you're playing it and when you're playing against it. And if you can see the open team sheet, you can figure out, when to let off that initial offensive pressure, go into your Dozo mode, and then exactly what type of end game you're trying to set up for your Tatsugiri plus your other backmons. And I think it's especially cool because you guys do have like a more flexible mode with Pawmot where you do have the choice of, okay, do I let my Dondozo go down now and then try to bring it back, or do I or let my Tatsugiri go down? Something that I noticed when we were playing practice sets, you could play way more aggressively with your Tatsugiri, which is not something that normal Dondozo teams really get to do. So I think you guys had a little more flexibility than most Dondozo teams too, which was something that I think is really useful when you're playing an open team sheet and you can respond to your opponent's team.
Yeah, I really agree with that about Revival Blessing. And this is something that, like, when I started using the team, I didn't have a great grasp of it at first, but after watching Carson and Mike both play with it, I realized, like, that's one of the best things about Palmot. You can take risks with your offensive pieces early on, maybe get a call wrong, or get this trade where, like, maybe Tatsugiri gets an important knockout, then goes down itself, and you still get it back later. That's a huge deal. You cannot like take risks with your Tatsugiri like that on Dondozo teams that don't have Palmot and get away with it in quite the same way that you can with this team.
And when you're using like if you threw Palmot with Revival Blessing on any team, it might not have the same impact that it does on this team. I don't think Revival Blessing is going to get you out of too many losing positions. But if you're reviving, the two fastest Pokemon in the format, given Scarf Tatsugiri or Meowscarada, you get to go first, even at half health with a frail Pokemon. It's still a Pokemon that you got to respect. Bringing back half a Dondozo and then bringing Tatsugiri in and clicking rest. Now it's just a whole nother Dondozo. So, reviving half a Pokemon isn't going to win you a lot of games unless those Pokemon can actually win games from that point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, do you want to walk me through the Pokemon on your team and why they're trained the way they are?
Let me see. So I'm looking at Arcanine first here. With Arcanine particularly, I think we agreed that it's best for this EV spread to just be like very straightforward. Might kind of convince me that the Arcanine doesn't actually need to be that fast to kind of do all the things that it needs to do, including like a lot of it's kind of just like, I don't know, they're all really important moves, but it's not like there's anything that you're really trying to outrun with this. Some of it is like kind of taking advantage of slower Pokemon, like I don't know, maybe a Tyranitar that most people don't run Jolly. And ultimately, I think it's best that it just hit as hard as possible. And Arcanine's base HP and defenses kind of just work out in such a way that I think it's probably best if you just invest in HP. And then we have the, even number of special defense points just to get the most value out of our Assault Vest.
Yeah, I think the priority on this Arcanine spread was really bulky, but also like really powerful. I think this thing started actually as a choice band Tera normal set because I just really wanted to, especially in the Murkrow matchup, get as much of that HP bar as I could with an extreme speed. And then as the matchups refined, like Assault Vest at Tera Fairy became the choice, but still doing 30% to things with extreme speed was like really cool to do. I know in one of Chuppa's top cut matches, I think people were a little worried about an extreme speed picking off a Tauros, but I was like, no, there's no way that thing lives. It's like max attack. And I think during one of my Swiss sets against Alberto Lara, the Flare Blitz just one-shot a Grass Skeledirge from full. And he was like a little taken aback, like he was not expecting that.
Yeah, this Arcanine just like it is pretty consistently like stronger than I'd expect it to be, just with extreme speed, getting those knockouts on low HP Pokemon, which is like kind of often a do or die scenario, like in that stream game against Angel that you mentioned. If extreme speed whiffed the knockout, I was just losing. So Arcanine needed to get it done, and after looking at the calcs, like if this was I don't know, Adamant 4 attack EVs or something, I'm not sure if it would have done it. I think the power of the Arcanine is just the one part of the spread that I could never see myself changing after using it.
Yeah.
I guess
Uh,
we should probably talk about the moves on it as well. So one thing Mike kind of alluded to earlier was the fact that this Arcanine has to help with the Dragons matchup and with the Trick Room matchup. And, Snarl and Play Rough as your third and fourth moves are really the way that you do that. Being able to snarl down like size spam teams when they don't have weakness policy Armorage. Indeed, is very vulnerable to snarl as well as just some other teams that are like maybe trying to play a little bit slower with their special attackers, like a team that would want to kind of end game with Rotom Wash, for instance. Tera Fairy Snarl Arcanine is a great way to just like wear strategies like that down, and then of course play rough to hit those dragons.
And I think as a slight sidebar with the Terra Fairy, um, you could see in this paste, I didn't put a single defensive Terra type that couldn't also be used in some offensive manner. So like Terra Fairy adding Play Rough Stab was very helpful. Right, every other Terra type adds a stab move to a Pokemon that didn't have it, like Dondozo, or amplifies one of the other types while giving it the defensive thing that Pokemon needs, like Gholdengo losing dark ghost typing, Tatsugiri losing dragon typing. All of those things were coming up in matchups, both on the offensive and the defensive side.
yeah, that's a really cool way of team building. Obviously, Dondozo, I feel like most of your Pokemon are offensively Terra, and I feel like you're probably Terra the Dondozo in most games, I imagine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
most
that's
games.
fair to say.
Most games you bring it to at least.
Yeah, and I guess it is really important to have those contingency plans when you can't bring it or when you have to be a little flexible. Maybe throw your opponent off guard, and having some flexibility in Terrace is always really valuable. Having a lot of damage coming out from random Pokemon is really powerful for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
So
guess
we can move.
yeah, you
We
want to
can
walk
move on to the
through
Palmot
the
then.
yeah, go for it.
So Palmot's the next one on the paste. He's such a cool little guy. We gave him the focus sash because he's just kind of frail strong. We had a focus sash available, so put it on him. He wants to live a move and click revive, so sash was coming up a lot. The moves are pretty self-explanatory. Double shock and close combat are just really strong. The Terra Electric is an awesome interaction with double shock. So when you click double shock, it's like burn up where you'd lose that typing. So you lose electric typing, but if you Terra, you get electric typing back, and it's permanent, and you can't lose it. So you keep clicking double shock, and you just can keep clicking it with no drawback. So that is an incredibly strong move when used like that. EV's pretty self-explanatory. Go first, hit hard.
One thing about Palmot that people maybe don't realize is that it actually has three really good abilities in Volt Absorb, Iron Fist, and Natural Cure. Of course, no reason for you to run Iron Fist on a Pokemon that has no punching moves. But I guess, did you consider running Iron Fist with something like Mach Punch? I think that's what Adrian did in his Victory Road team. Or did you consider running Volt Absorb, or how useful was Natural Cure?
Natural Cure was just like so helpful for taking Amoonguss spores like early in the game and then switching out. I don't think I'm not sure if I ever tried Mach Punch with Iron Fist on this team. I tried it on other teams because it's something that I know like Carson had been really into, and I think ultimately it just comes down to this Pawmot really needs to deal with Hydreigon and some of your Dozo modes when you can't like really count on your other Pokemon to do it, and Mach Punch is simply not going to do that. So I think all the decision making on this Palmot is just like very straightforward, especially like Volt Absorb. I just don't really think there are quite enough electric type attacks in the meta, and extra Pokemon that can like kind of take that spore and then just either ignore it like Gholdengo or Grass type Meowscarada, or in Palmot's case, you eat the spore, then you switch out. It's just so helpful to stack those. Amoonguss is an amazing Pokemon. I think just like you should take every step you can to kind of like bake extra Amoonguss checks into a team.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially given how common Amoonguss is as a Dondozo matchup, where it has Clear Smog, and people are so reliant on it. But if you either don't bring Dondozo, or you get into a position where you're not worried about Clear Smog, you're worried about Spore, you have 4 really good switch-ins to that, which is very cool. Yeah, so I guess Palmot, like you said, pretty self-explanatory. Let's move on to the Gholdengo.
All right. So
Yeah,
Gholdengo was
you go.
awesome. I think someone mentioned that there were 3 different timid Gholdengo in the top 4, all with different items. So I think I was the first one in the tub to bring up timid Gholdengo in one of those tub tours, and I was just smacking people around with it. So I guess I'd want to talk a little bit about how I ended up with this. But basically, it started with a few different things. So I was doing what everyone did and started with modest Gholdengo because special attacks, biggest stat, boost that. There you go. Day 1 logic. Didn't look like there was anything faster than Gholdengo that you'd want to outspeed with timid, so I just parked it modest. And then I was running some damage calcs, and I don't think I could find like one single thing that was helpful. I think I put like max special attack, and it was like, all right, everything's a roll, and then if you Tera, you just kill everything. Put max bulk and was like, all right, that's a little bulky, but it still rolls. So when I started to see that I didn't really care about anything, I started thinking about timid, because everything faster than modest Gholdengo should also be faster than timid Gholdengo, right? If you're looking at Arcanine and Volcarona, those scary bulky fires that you don't want to really be looking at. But those were all just parking right above modest Gholdengo, because there is nothing in the meta between those 2 speeds. So when you go to timid Gholdengo, suddenly you're faster than Arcanines, you're faster than Volcaronas, you're faster than all the other Gholdengo, and it becomes such a different and more reliable Pokemon, especially at +2 special attack once you've clicked Nasty Plot. I think some of our practice games, Chuppa, we realized the whole matchup is just get to +2, click Tera, make it rain into a Volcarona, and do 90% to it. And like, you're going to outspeed it, and it's going to be incredible.
Yeah, I really think Timid was the way to go for this tournament. Like you said, there are a lot of top players at the tournament who like all kind of came to Timid independently. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh, well, so I'm a while ago, I was more worried about those other fires that can choose to be faster than Golden Go if they want, like Arcanine and Volcarona. But like you said, it really does take a lot of EVs for those Pokemon to outrun Tim and Golden Go. And I think going into this tournament, people really underrated Tim and Golden Go. Probably thought like, okay, I'm going to outrun Modest, that'll be it. Or maybe they just straight up did not have the EVs to outrun Timid. And that was just so powerful to take advantage of, like slower Arcanines that you could maybe hit with Palmot's fake out, and then suddenly Arcanine's worried about like +2 Shadow Ball for next turn, even though you're the Steel type and they're the Fire type. Timid's just a way to like get ahead on those interactions, and especially after getting more familiar with the damage calcs, I didn't really end up noticing the fact that we weren't modest, we dropped some special attack. It still really did everything I needed it to do, even though it made some, special attack stat compromises.
And the thing with Gholdengo on this team is that every time we ended up having to bench Dondozo for a given matchup, that matchup became Gholdengo. Like, boost Gholdengo, protect Gholdengo. You got Pawmot, you got Arcanine to keep it safe with Fake Out and Intimidate and Snarl. And your whole game plan is to just get +2, +4, and click Make It Rain until you've won. maybe Tatsugiri or Meowscarada in the back to clean up some of the chip down Pokemon. But when you're looking at those really bulky, like the Baxcalibur, Tauros teams, the some Amoonguss, all of those things that take hits pretty well from Dondozo, and really should take hits pretty well from Gholdengo, but not +2 Life Orb, Tera Steel, make it rain, right? You're just killing everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I tend to describe like Gholdengo as the MVP of my tournament run just because I did play a lot of those matchups where Dondozo felt like maybe fringe viable at best. Like, okay, they have Intimidate spam and a Moongus, which is like kind of enough to make me not want to do it. And Gholdengo like happens to be really strong into some of those, and in other ones, like maybe Angel's team, for instance, Gholdengo is not incredibly strong, but at the same time, if you get your plays right, it will be able to pop off. So it's just like kind of a Pokemon that can do it all.
Yep. And I mean, we talked about it on Alberto's team report. We talked about it on Jody's team report, who's also running Timid. Angel and I will be talking about it on our team report coming out in a few days. We were also Timid. Again, Mike, you were the seed for a lot of that. It was absolutely the call for this tournament, and I think just compounding that was the fact that Gholdengo was the most common Pokemon in Top Cut. It was everywhere. And it also is, they're both ghost types, so they both KO each other, and having the faster Gholdengo was a huge advantage. And when, it's over half the field in Top Cut, that makes a huge impact. And I don't know if it'll necessarily be the call moving forward, where you do want to play, a dozen timid Gholdengo speed ties, or maybe you want to go like 36 speed modest and say, I'm just outbulking you. I don't know. But at least for this tournament, timid Gholdengo was 100% the play.
Yeah, I admittedly don't know offhand exactly what Mike EV'd this Gholdengo to do, but I will say the bulk on it is to take Jolly Meowscarada knockoff 7 out of 8 times. That's not going to be so important when your opponent is using Adamant Meowscarada like Giseok was, though. So I was happy with the bulk for the most part, but yeah, watch out for Adamant Meowscarada.
Yeah, this EV spread was admittedly, like I said, I went max at special attack, I went max HP. None of them really felt right, so I think I just slid the bars somewhere in the middle there and said that's just right. The HP hits like just under a multiple of 10 for Life Orb, then special attack got dumped. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess moving on to the Meowscarada, this is a pretty standard set, although Choice Band does have a lot of options it can run. Why'd you choose to run Choice Band, and why'd you choose to run these 4 moves?
I'd say the Choice Band was there because Sash was taken by Pawmot mostly. But I did really value the damage that this thing put out in some matchups, especially if you were able to click Terra Grass Flower Trick with a Choice Band. It was just killing anything on a neutral hit. So that was really helpful. Dual Dark moves, because Knockoff has its own benefits, and then Sucker Punch sneaks in a couple hits where you need it. And then U-Turn was probably the MVP move on this Pokemon overall, especially in open team sheets, again, where you could just see the protects wherever they are. And if you lead, I was a big fan of leading like Meowscarada, Dondozo, and just U-turning into your Tatsugiri turn 1. Get that little chip damage, maybe break a Sash, maybe a Mimikyu Disguise, and then have a huge Dondozo move come out right behind that. So EV spread self-explanatory, and then we picked Protean as the ability, literally just because U-turn was on the set. You get that stab bug U-turn, which one-shots Hydreigon.
Yeah, I'd really say the main drawback of running Protean is if you click knockoff or sucker punch, you're not going to have your grass type anymore. So that really can hurt versus a Moongus, but overall you're also not getting OKO'd by Pollen Puff if you drop either grass or dark typing. So I think it ultimately kind of makes up for it, and the strong U-turns just kind of justified in the first place. definitely like really nothing I would change about the Meowscarada. I think Sucker Punch is really important to have some priority on the team, or another priority move rather. It can be very scary to lock into, very exploitable, but also sometimes you kind of just need to get a knockout with it. And I didn't find myself missing any of the other options that it can run, like low kick or play rough. But then Terra Grass also really good to kind of just push some of those like one hit knockouts that you can get with Flower Trick, like bulky Mousehold. I think some Annihilate sets fold to it. It's just really nothing that needs to change about the set.
Yeah. I mean, this has sort of been a staple on Dondozo teams since Aaron used it in Limitless, like you mentioned. So nothing too surprising here, and which means I guess we can get to the meat of the team, which is of course the Tatsugiri and the Dondozo. Kind of inherently go together. Talk me through the sets for these Pokemon and why you trained them the way you did.
All right. So the Tatsugiri and the Dondozo. So the Dondozo was like the day one idea where I knew from the start I wanted Dragon, Terra, and then I really wanted Chesto Rest from like very beginning. I know a lot of people switched over to like leftovers, 3 attacks, protect, but with the offensive tempo of this team and just knowing, like, I don't want to click protect. I want to click attack, 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 rest, attack, attack, attack. That's how I wanted it to go. And then you lose Dondozo, whatever, you bring it back and you just keep doing it. But the team is moving fast. Rest ended up being very helpful in the mirror match too, where it's just Dondozo versus Dondozo for a while. If you end up in a position where you take a KO early, you're up like 4-3. You could literally just click rest for the next 20 minutes, and you could win on the most safe win condition that you have. Otherwise, you can use, if you've gone into that Dondozo versus Dondozo mirror and you took a little bit of HP out of theirs, you could usually just do the rest of the job with like wave crashes, order ups, and a rest timed well. Once you get your Chesto Berry burned, of course, then it's a little slower, but you still do eventually get there. Terra Dragon was picked just because I thought it felt like the most efficient Dondozo that you could have. I thought every other Dondozo was dealing with some sort of drawback on the Terra type. Like Steel was cool as a defensive option. It blocked Clear Smog, cool. Flying was really good offensively, but you had to run Terra Blast, and if you didn't want to Terra your Dondozo, it was sort of a dead slot. But Dragon, it just adds a stab move to the best move on the Pokemon, being Order Up. So having that option, Terra Dragon, Order Up, one-hit KOs opposing Meowscarada, and you then resist their Flower Trick, which was scaring you in the first place. So you do still get a lot of that offensive power just off of moves you were running anyway.
Yeah, I remember when I was first learning about this team and like maybe trying out Terra Flying Dozo, you said the same thing. Dragon type order up is just efficient, and I really think that's the best way to describe it. It's like if you're almost always clicking order up at least once to get that speed boost and begin to do things like outrun Meowscarada, outrun Dragapult, things like that, you might as well get the stab on it, and it's never going to have a dead slot. Also, you get to run like I guess I would describe these 3 coverage moves as kind of like the core Dondozo moveset. There's just so many Pokemon that you want to be using one of these against, and you're rarely going to feel like you're out of options against them. It's like only once you start taking Intimidates is Terra Dragon Order Up really going to fall off, and maybe you'll wish you had something else at that point. But for the most part, like this is just an incredibly well-rounded Dondozo set.
Mm-hmm. And so you did mention a little bit, but can you talk to me a little more about why you chose to run the speed boosting Tatsugiri instead of like the attack boosting, like what you traditionally see on Dondozo?
Yeah, I remember I'd been using attack boosting like near the start of the format. It was kind of just the most popular set, but something also stuck out to me. Like speed is generally the most powerful stat in Pokemon to boost. If you have a way to boost speed with something like Max Airstream in the previous format, that's like just always going to be a really primo option. I think with Dondozo, it's the same way. By getting one speed boost, you're suddenly just like in this different speed tier. You're not just fast, you're super fast, and it really helps you get the edge on Pokemon that might think they are able to beat you otherwise. Just like it's great that you're that 174 speed stat with this EV spread otherwise, so you're outrunning Palmot, but maybe not something like Mousehold. And then just by getting one more boost, you really do turn the table on so many Pokemon.
Hmm. And the way speed boosting Tatsugiri interacts in the mirror match is also really helpful, because you end up in this spot where once neither player really wants to take the KO on the other Dondozo, because that means that you have low HP and now you're actually playing 1v2, right? Their Tatsugiri is still there, their Meowscarada is coming in, both of which outspeed and one shot your Dondozo. But when you come out of that mirror as +6 speed, you one shot their Choice Scarf Tatsugiri with the next order up. You can rest off some of that HP before they move. You just have so many options once you exit that really stagnant part of the mirror, and it lets you win from there pretty well. Because you
Yeah,
could
otherwise
easily
there's
get
just like
reverse
kind of,
sweeped on that.
yeah. There's a lot of Pokemon that can outrun Dondozo. It's just like Meowscarada is incredibly popular. That's something that if you take your Dondozo knockout too early, it's like very easy to imagine you're just going to be staring down their Tatsugiri and their Meowscarada, and they might not just be able to knock out Dondozo. Maybe they'll get like Tatsugiri as well, and suddenly you'll be behind despite getting the first Dondozo knockout. With speed, you just don't really have to worry about those things as much.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And then I imagine the EV spread on Dondozo is pretty self-explanatory, given that you're speed boosting, you're not boosting attack, and you need to actually outspeed stuff. So, hence the pretty simple EV spread. But did you have any other considerations when you were making it?
Yeah, I looked at a lot of things in the speed number on this set. I was like, all right, I'm already boosting my speed. Maybe I could be a little bit more efficient and throw some speed EVs into special defense. I wanted the near max attack stat because that basically one shots any Murkrow that decides not to put max bold in their investment. Um, and you really only get that chance if you hit it on the switch in, but that means you also two hit KO them. So if they click haze, you wave crash, and then you kill them with the next one. So I liked having the max attack in series one where Marco was everywhere. So I was like, all right, let me see how much special defense I could squeeze out of this and use the speed boosting Tatsugiri to fill in all the extra. And slowly, I just kept putting more EVs into the speed because I was like, all right, I want to outspeed this thing on turn. I want to outspeed Hydreigon on turn one. All right, if I'm doing that, I think I really want to outspeed Garchomp on turn one too. Let me put a little more speed. And then eventually I realized like Pawmot, if I think Pawmot is as good a Pokemon as I do because I'm using it in regionals, like I can't disrespect it. I should probably also outspeed the Pawmot on turn one, and then I just ended up here at max speed again.
Yeah, I agree. Like the spread does look really simplistic, but I think you basically need to be near max attack just because Dondozo's base attack is like actually really not that high. You notice all the EVs you put in it, and I think if you went with something like Jolly, you'd absolutely notice the drop, and you wouldn't have like the extra speed really wouldn't be doing that much for you. I just think it's really best that it be this straightforward.
Mm-hmm. And then last but not least, we have the Tatsugiri. Choice Scarf Tatsugiri has again kind of been standard ever since Aaron did so well with this sort of team at Limitless. But do you want to talk me through the set and why it's trained the way it is?
Yeah, the scarf felt like it really fit this offensive tempo of the team. It makes Tatsugiri a real Pokemon, especially when you lead it. You could lead this thing with like Tatsugiri, Meowscarada. I found a lot of games where I would just click like a Muddy Water or a Draco and U-turn to Dondozo. So you get 2 attacks off on turn 1, and you switch Dondozo into the field to take the hits. Tatsugiri, Pawmot, Tatsugiri, Meowscarada, you have the soak option where you could just turn anything into a water type and kill it. I don't think I clicked this move soak nearly enough during my run. I think there were a few games I lost where I really should have clicked it. So that's something I probably still need to work on with the team. But I think the most common use case we found for it was like Tera, Water, Amoonguss without Protect. Those things are actually like pretty common. Water is a pretty common Tera type for the Amoonguss, and it has no answer to soak. You can't Protect around it. You can't Tera around it. You just soak it and kill it. Which is something the Amoonguss player really doesn't want to see, them losing that thing on turn 1 like that. And they can't even really switch anything in to take that because it just means something's dying.
Yeah, I honestly didn't really find myself wanting to soak at all during my run. I think it's a very high risk move, but the one thing you get to do in open sheet is you know where the protects are and where they aren't. So sometimes you really are able to pin down a slot like that, and double shock or flower trick are just such strong moves that like once something is weak to those types, it's probably going to fall to them. The rest of the moves are pretty self-explanatory, like Terra Water, Muddy Water is really strong in matchups where maybe you can't bring Dondozo, but you still really want that strong water coverage that's going to hit everything. Just put a lot of pressure down on the board. Draco Meteor is Draco Meteor. It's able to push for like knockouts or near knockouts on frail Pokemon like Meowscarada and Tauros both like have a role to get knocked out in one shot by, I believe. And then Icy Wind was one of the moves that I clicked the most just because it lets maybe other fast Pokemon like you try to set up board positions like Tatsugiri and Gholdengo and just click Icy Wind, make it rain, like I was doing in the end game against Jody in top 4. It's just really strong to get some of those Pokemon that are kind of between 150 and 220 speed, where Tatsugiri sets just make them fold to your other strong moves.
Mm-hmm. And I think Justin Burns put it pretty well, where if you're playing Dondozo Tatsugiri and you don't want to Terra Dragon your Dondozo, you probably don't want Dragon type Tatsugiri. So Terra Water ended up being a pretty useful like defensive option to live a Dragon Claw, to live a Hyper Voice from a Sylveon, things like that, where it gives you like one extra move on this frail Pokemon, and those added up.
Yeah.
I think the EV spread on this thing, I am trying to remember what I did. I think I threw a couple of defense EVs in so I could live like I think it was some Garchomp Earthquake calc. I don't know if they were
It's
Life
Terra
Orb.
Ground Jolly or Life Orb Jolly.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I felt like in some of the Murkrow Garchomp endgames where like you're facing down those 2 Pokemon, it's really nice to know your Tatsugiri is going to live the Earthquake and kill back with the Draco Meteor.
Yeah, I didn't have that like coming up in practice too much, but also your special attack is very naturally high. I think some of those like the main drawback to this is just makes it a little bit harder to push for like knockouts or near knockouts with Draco Meteor, but I think those are like kind of plays that you should be trying to avoid anyway. Like if your Draco Meteor only knocks out Meowscarada half the time, it's just not good practice to like try and one shot a Meowscarada with Draco Meteor. So with this, you don't do that, and then you get that Garchomp benefit. Garchomp is an extremely scary Pokemon for this team, so it's like kind of important to have a little piece of tech like this against it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then you mentioned that you had a little bit of trouble with Garchomp Murkrow stuff. Do you want to talk me through how you approached some of your more common matchups that you expected to see this tournament?
Sure. All right, so I guess we'll start with that one. So Murkrow in general, we had like a few different ways we were going about approaching that matchup. It really depended on what else was on the team. Some of them brought like Murkrow plus the dragons. Some of them had like Mousehold Annihilate on the team too. So you really had to approach it a little differently depending on that. So the first thing I was looking at, especially like Murkrow Gholdengo is another lead that's like really scary to look at for like any Pokemon. So you got to kind of get a read for what they are best leading in that matchup. The open team sheet does help with that. Like if they have no reason to lead anything but Murkrow, you really want to lead your Pawmot and you really want to kill that thing early. I think a lot of players adapted to the Dondozo matchup by leaving their Murkrow in the back so that you have your two good Pokemon. The Dondozo player, whenever they decide to lock in their Dondozo, Murkrow comes in and hazes it away. So they make sure that they keep their Murkrow around. In that case, you really want to, with this team, you really want to lead Dondozo instead. Because like I want to get my first attack or two off without the Murkrow on the field to click haze. So I'm going turn 1 Dondozo. I'm bringing Tatsugiri in either with a U-turn or with a just switch. I'm killing a thing, putting some damage everywhere else. And then a couple turns later, I have Palmot. So I'm just going to revive Dondozo once I've chipped or killed the Murkrow and another thing. And then from there, Dondozo's pretty comfortable cleaning up the game. So you basically use Dondozo 1 to bait out a Murkrow, and you use Dondozo 2 to win the game.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to go about it. Just like those Murkrow teams have such a wide range of partners, and some of them, like on the whole, there's a lot of pretty scary Pokemon there, like Focus Energy, Hydra, and Garchomp are just Pokemon that are like already kind of difficult to respond to and really rely on like you're going to have to be smart with your resources against those. And then Murkrow kind of holds them together, gives them the speed they need to fight against otherwise scary Pokemon like Tatsugiri, Pawmot, Meowscarada. I I'm not actually too familiar what the Arcanine calcs against Murkrow are. Like, are you able to get it with something like play rough into extreme speed? Because that would be a huge deal against it. I think really just like finding leads that are going to let you put a lot of pressure on Murkrow, like whether it's in the front or in the back, are going to be important. And it's just such a good matchup for Arcanine too. It's really going to be able to take a hit from something like Hydreigon pretty well, which you don't exactly have other switch-ins for. And once maybe somebody like Gholdengo gets things low, Arcanine is just threatening everybody with extreme speed. Like, even if it's a scary matchup, I do think you have a bunch of ways to play it, and you can really justify like all 6 of your Pokemon in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously there's like a number of other teams that you kind of expected to see. But I guess were there any that you thought were especially difficult and that you had like very specific game plans for?
Yeah, Adi, the team that you and Angel use is like one of the ones that I was most scared of. I remember, touching down in Los Angeles, hang out with like Gavin and Elisa for a few days and, maybe learning a little bit about what other people are using, even if I've decided on my own team and just hearing like, oh, there's Scarf Toros. That doesn't sound very fun. I think that was one of the teams that I least wanted to play in the tournament. And luckily, Mike had done a little bit of prep against it, so at least we had some idea of what we wanted to do. But I think it was always going to be like one of the scariest teams in the field.
Yeah, I mean, being in Tub, we knew that we were gonna have to probably deal with Pelipper, Tor, like your team at some point. Um, Fortunately, being the resident Dondozo player, was the one ping to like run the matchup. You guys wrecked me. I think Nails 2-0'd me. Rajan beat me 2-1. So like with a 1-4 record going into the tournament, I wasn't feeling great about having to see it. So when Chuppa hit it in, what was that, top 16, I sat down with him. We really went through like some of the replays. We went through some of the some of the game plans that we could possibly use. And what we settled on was, really just lean on Gholdengo to run through your team. It's going to have to sit in front of a King Gambit for a couple turns, and you're just going to have to deal with that and click enough Make It Rains to weaken the rest of the Pokemon, so that, and then Pawmot is able to kill the King Gambit at the end. But that was really the only way through it. It was Palmot, Gholdengo, Arcanine, Meowscarada, and good luck.
Yeah, I think it's just like such a good example of another matchup that we were thinking about in practice against that Volcarona Sableye stuff, where it's again, you're kind of just gonna like need to lead Palmot Gholdengo, or a lot of the game is really gonna revolve around like making aggressive plays with Gholdengo and just getting them right. Which is like, kind of a tough thing to count on yourself to do in regionals top cut, but in scary matchups, sometimes you just need to do things like that. I ended up being somewhat happy with that Meowscarada Palmot plan that I was using against Angel in games 2 and 3, just because that team has so many leads that are going to be threatened by like at least one knockout from that pair of Pokemon. Like even something like Tauros, which seems like it could be great against those, it has to worry about Fake Out into Flower Trick, and if Tauros goes down and maybe there's Dondozo in the back, suddenly the Dondozo player has all the control again. I think it's good to just like really make sure that you are threatening that team as much as they threaten you, and you do have tools that are like going to try and make it a little bit closer to even if many turns it's going to feel like the opponent has better tools than the Dozo player does.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you guys have like a pretty solid list of matchups that you felt like or did you guys have a list of matchups where you knew you could bring Dozo and a list of matchups where you didn't, or was it kind of by feel, and did you often feel like you were switching between the Dozo modes and the non-Dozo modes in your tournament run?
I don't think I had such a clear-cut list like that. It was, and I really didn't have too many matchups where I had like rehearsed game plans into. Most of the time it was look at the open team sheet and say, all right, what happens if I bring Dondozo? If the all the moves and the items on their sheet that make me think that was not going to work, then I'll start looking at the other game plans. But it was really like, how can I brute force Dondozo through this matchup, and just go from there through team preview.
Yeah, I think like there's some archetypes like Tauros, Amoonguss especially was getting really popular in the lead up to this tournament. That's one matchup where like you just have to be so careful about Dozo once you see those. So I guess they're like maybe most common on something like a Max Caliber team. So that as an archetype is something where you're going to need to be careful about it. But it's really on a case by case basis, because we can talk about something like Mousehold and Annihilate teams. Dondozo loves fighting that pair. It's not too hard for it. You have tools that are just like going to make sure your Dozo excels against it. But then suddenly, if there's like a Murkrow or an Amoonguss in the back, you have to think a lot harder about it. So it wasn't something that I had like really firm plans on like when to bring Dondozo or when not to. Just to go back to open sheet, you're just going to have like a better idea once you see that open sheet of whether it's a Dozo matchup or not. And a lot of the time, like maybe between like games 1 and 2 of a set, I'd think, okay, maybe I won game 1 without using Dozo. Maybe that means I'm allowed to lean on it harder for game 2 because my opponent's already worried about a different game plan. It's just going to be really important to be flexible like that in a number of matchups.
And so 2 things I think I did really well with putting this team together is I felt that I could bring Dondozo. I could bring it to anything. Like it could fight its way through pretty much any Dondozo counterplay that existed in one way or another. And then you also had the very clear option not to bring it. And the other thing is, I think during my tournament run, I led at some point like every combination of these 6 Pokemon. You are just so flexible in the things you're able to lead and the things you're able to bring in the back that your opponent's always guessing, or always trying to play on the back foot. uh, in team preview. They just can't answer everything on this team sheet.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that like I'm sure a lot of people going into this tournament really thought they had their Dondozo matchup down, but that's the strength of Dondozo. You have four other Pokemon. It's not like just hazing away the Dondozo doesn't mean you have this win if your opponent has maybe they're just bringing the other four Pokemon and those happen to do really well against you. It's just such a tough Pokemon to pin down in team building, and that's really one of its big strengths.
Yeah. And so I guess on that note, we should talk about the tournament. So I guess, Mike, you could talk about, you want to tell us how you did and any notable matchups that you had in your tournament first?
Sure. I didn't have the greatest tournament. I went 6-4 with the team. I'd say I hit three really rough matchups in a row. Alberto Lara and Chase Liebert with they were running the same team. It was like Grimmsnarl, Skeledirge, Corviknight, and I'd practiced enough on ladder to know how to approach like Grimmsnarl, Skeledirge. You basically just kill everything around the Skeledirge until the very end of the game. If they're Tera Grass, you have Arcanine. If they're Tera Fairy, you have Gholdengo. Dondozo is going to force that Tera at some point, so they can't be Fire in the end game, a Fire Ghost. But in Alberto's team, he had the Corviknight next to it too. So now you have two Pokemon on the field behind a Reflect that, like, you actually just can't kill in time. So they're eventually going to chip you down and take down Dondozo. And they were very well prepared for Dondozo. I think in a way other players weren't really looking for, and yeah, it was just unfortunate to hit them back to back. And then it was one of the Murkrow, Gholdengo, Garchomp players I hit at that same point in the tournament, and like I think my margins in that matchup were fine. I just went with the game plan I described here, but they were running Choice Banded Garchomp, and I think that was enough to put the matchup in their favor. And it at one point I Tera Fairy'd my Arcanine and it killed it with a Banded Earthquake plus a Foul Play, and like I was not expecting that at all. So I was like, all right, like Band just ate into the margins I had in the matchup, and it was really hard. Yeah, I squeezed in at 127th place. So I got 40 championship points from it. So the weekend wasn't a complete whiff. I got to play a good friend Izzy around, I think that was right after the lunch break too. She was really dreading it because she knew my team. She was like, I really did not want to play this. Yeah, so that was a fun game. Shout out to Izzy.
Yeah. And then, of course, Chuppa, you did a little better. You got second place. Did you have a few matchups that you want to talk about and tell us about your tournament run?
Yeah, let me see. So round one I actually played Heather Rizenga, who is from California, I think, using Murkrow. And it was not really the matchup that I wanted to see like round one, just playing against a known player with a team that I knew was scary, and it really just set my tournament off in a way that like didn't have me so optimistic because I felt like I had to make kind of a lot of risky plays to come out ahead. But it was kind of like the last Murkrow team I had to play, which I ended up being like really lucky for. I did end up taking a loss to Rogov in round three with kind of that like more standard Baxcalibur team, the Salazzle one that Kyle popularized a few weeks back. It ended up being like pretty close. I tried to do Dondozo game one, kind of just got hit with the Intimidate cycle. The Intimidate Amoonguss stuff could not do a whole lot from there, so just had to play like some pretty aggressive games of Pokemon against it, but I think it was good to get that loss out of my system because I had an idea like better plays to go for when I played another few Max Caliber in the next few rounds. I don't think it's a Pokemon that like the team is exactly favored against generally, but also like the matchup's just kind of near neutral. You and them are both going to be making some aggressive plays and just trying to get them right, making sure that your Tatsugiri is able to do things like put muddy water down on Salazzle, for instance, is really important. But after getting through those tough back caliber games, I kind of just had a long string of wins against like some teams a little bit later in the tournament that I don't think had quite as good of a Dondozo matchup, like a few teams that kind of relied on things like Annihilate. I actually beat Jisiok later during my Swiss run. I think I was one of his two Swiss losses, and I think he was still like kind of figuring out what his matchups against Dragon Dondozo was like because he was just relying on different things than I might have expected him to, like the poison type Garganical, which couldn't knock me out with Salt Cure quickly enough to kind of save its partners from all dying to Dragon Order up every turn. Um, and then let's see, I played Gavin the last round of Swiss, but we were both 8-1. We didn't have anything to play for, so I just let him have the win because Donald was on his resistance. Um, but it gave me a little bit of practice against Palafin, which was not something I had previously, which kind of ended up helping me later. Um, yeah, let me see what other matchups. And then in top 16, we got to see the set against Angel using your team. Talked about that a little bit. That's a really scary matchup. I think on average, the Dondozo players are not going to be able to win that. It's just one of those matchups where I almost wish I had something like Terra Flying instead, just because that Tauros and a Moongia cycling engine is just like really easy for that team to bring against you. It's going to be so effective against Dondozo. Um, in top 8, I played Emilio. That was my first Dondozo mirror of the tournament, but I think maybe because he was attack boosting Dondozo instead of speed boosting Dondozo, he was choosing not to bring it to the matchup, at which point it was a little bit easier for my own Dondozo to go in against his other Pokemon, just take knockouts against frail Pokemon like Talonflame and Glamora.
Hmm. I mean, you talked about
I
this earlier,
guess,
right? You
yeah.
have a incredible Dondozo matchup because you kind of like very, you don't out damage each other really, but you get to rest and heal back up to full, and so it's really hard for them to ever actually break through yours when you can slowly but steadily break through theirs, right? You said you didn't
Yeah,
bring Dondozo in the matchup.
no, I'd heard that he just like was kind of trying to avoid the Dondozo mirror, and I think especially against a set like ours, it's probably not a mirror that someone wants to opt into if they can help it. So it was just something that I was able to take advantage of. I think the really big lead that Mike helped me work out that was so impactful there was Arcanine and Tatsugiri together. Glamora is actually not able to knock out either of those Pokemon on one hit without landing like a crit or a poison or something. So you're able to go for plays like maybe Extreme Speed into Talonflame, turn off Gale Wings, and then follow up with a Muddy Water. It's just a lead that really puts pressure on the Talonflame Glamora lead that team loves to go for.
And one other fun interaction in that matchup that I don't think came up, but if you just let Glamora set the toxic spikes and then let your Tatsugiri get poisoned, Dondozo gets to rest it off, but then the Tatsugiri slowly fades away, faints, and then you get to bring in a whole another Pokemon in that empty slot. Um, so that is another way that matchup can play out, specifically against like Glamora Dondozo.
Yeah, and in practice, like I felt like Emilio had enough damage to kind of punch through my rest mode, and that didn't end up happening. Actually, kind of the opposite happened one of the games. He just, Tatsugiri took its poison kind of early on, and then over time, the poison chip added up enough that Meowscarada was able to knock it out with Sucker Punch later in the game, which is like definitely not something that's going to happen to a Tatsugiri at full HP. So it can go both ways.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I guess I'll talk about top 4 and finals as well. Both pretty tough matchups against Jody, especially was a team that I kind of some of the same notes as like what you and Angel were using, Audie, where just that King Gambit and Rain is extremely hard for me to knock out. It's a matchup where I really want to be able to lean on Gholdengo, and when King Gambit is making that harder for me to do, just like I have to preserve my Pawmot, like my life depends on it, really make sure that its focus ash isn't being broken for free. I think it's a game where I probably should have tried Dondozo in one of those games, but I was just really worried about like Steel type Salamence, Amoonguss, Haze, Palafin. It definitely felt like he had some potential Pokemon that were going to make it hard for me to bring Dondozo, and I really kind of just wanted to go for my other Pokemon and maybe give him lines that weren't quite as obvious.
Mhm.
And then finals against Jisiok again. Again, like I might have had a good matchup into that, but ultimately I think Jisiok was probably playing a little bit more consistently than I was that set and really taking advantage of his Meowscarada's damage, and the fact that I was like not so willing to maybe Terra Steel my Gholdengo when I needed to. I actually think that's a matchup where the team doesn't need to bring it Dondozo mode. You could totally do Pawmot and Arcanine and still have them be really strong players in that matchup. I think there's a number of different ways to approach it, and ultimately, like it's just not one of the scariest matchups. But against a player like that, anything can be a scary matchup.
Hmm. And he wrote more about the matchup in his team report that was written. And he said he lost to you and he lost to Emilio in Swiss, so two Dendozos. Maybe his Dendozo matchup, in theory, wasn't as strong as he thought it was, but he really found the lines. I thought it was really cool to see him kind of force your Tera with Meowscarada, and then do so much damage with his Baxcalibur, and kind of get through it that way. Putting it into Ice Shard range is really strong because then he gets a free attack into the Tatsugiri on that turn. So I was really impressed by how he played the matchup in finals, and then of course, like you alluded to, he was actually adamant Meowscarada and not Jolly. So that game three, he kind of it looked like he caught you off guard there, and kind of blew you out because of it.
Yeah, exactly. When I was playing Jisiok in Swiss, it almost felt like I was playing him at, on power saver mode. He was at 50% power or something, and then by finals, he had just downloaded me. He knew what to do against Dondozo suddenly, and I would have to fight so much harder to stay ahead.
Hmm. And of course, that finals is and your top four set, and I believe your top 16 set, all were streamed, so you can go and watch back a few of your sets. I think Day One Swiss is no longer on YouTube. I forget if you were streamed or not. Day one.
No, I didn't end up on stream during day one. It is really too bad that they took it down, though.
Hmm. So there's plenty of if you want to go and watch Chuppa expertly pilot this team, that is available for you on the official YouTube channel for Pokemon's YouTube channel. Um, but yeah, that's a really good overview of the tournament run. Congratulations again on your second place performance at what is for now the biggest regional since like 2013, um, and yeah, just a really impressive run with a very cool take on the Dondozo archetype. Um, yeah. So, did you have any final words or shoutouts that you wanted to give?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I want to say is if you're interested in learning this team, one of the first things you should do is probably go and watch those stream games. I think they're both like really great examples of, or all three of them are great examples of how to play the team in matchups that can be tough, and they sort of show off the different range of options that you have to approach those. I guess as shout outs go, of course, shout outs to Mike, who graciously lent me this team when I was struggling to figure out what version of Dondozo to use. Between the two of us, it's almost like I'm the Dondozo, the guy who doesn't know what to do, and you're the Tatsugiri, the guy with all the plans. So that's really the synergy that we've gone and established here.
That's the real Dondozo for sure.
Other shout outs I'd like to give are to Zach Carlson and Aaron Trailer, people that when I was working on other versions of Dondozo, I was really able to, kind of talk through some of the lines. And I know they were always like a little bit more convinced on something like Terra Flying. So it's just great to have insight on people who played the team slightly differently than I did. And of course, I was really happy to see Zach get top 16 at this regional.
Yeah. Like I said, that's definitely going on the thumbnail, but it yeah, having friends is broken. Having people who can help you out work through your lines in Top Cut is really powerful, and it's cool that it wasn't just you, but also your whole cohort of Dunbozos who did really well with the team, or variants of the team. Mike, did you have any final words or shoutouts?
Um, yeah, I guess shout outs to Chuppa, and Carson was also pretty heavily involved in practicing and prepping the team. Um, toward the end, I wasn't able to play in any of the tub tours because I'm an old man and I go to bed early, and you guys stay up all night. But Chuppa and Carson would just like bring my team and sweep the tournaments, and that would give me a pretty good feeling. Um, yeah, as far as shout outs go, yeah, shout outs those two, shout outs the rest of the tub.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the kind of like method that we had for practicing with us was just really good because of our friend group. We were able to get in a lot of sets, share a lot of replays with each other, and really have discussions about the best way to approach a given matchup. And then what that meant was by the time I was in top cut, maybe had a little bit of time between rounds, it was so easy to talk to you or one of the other Dozo players and figure out, hey, what's the best way to approach this? And that was just really helpful before so many of those cut games. It really is broken to like use a team alongside a few other people and just be able to have those discussions about how to approach things.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I definitely, if you are interested in the Dondozo archetype, this is certainly the highest placing team, well, maybe the strongest Dondozo team out there right now. I definitely recommend,
Definitely the strongest team out there right now.
undoubtedly the strongest team out there right now.
Yeah.
And I definitely recommend you try it out. Of course, the rental code is on screen right now, and the paste will be in the description down below, as will Chuppa and Mike's Twitter accounts, so you can go follow them on socials as well. But yeah, that's all that I have. Thank you all for watching, and congratulations again on your performance, Chuppa. And until next time, I will see you all later.